A man in his 30s flirted with me. Unacceptable. I mean, I'm 32, but I look 23 and still have the spirit of an 18-year-old. He should find someone his own age instead. I froze with the tray trembling in my hands while everyone looked at me as if I were part of the furniture. The sugar spilled on the desk, and all I could think about was how that would look on camera, because yes, everything was on camera. Lulu snapped her fingers at me as if I were a faulty lamp. Behind her, a man let out a low laugh. One of those that don't try to sound cruel, but still cut through you. When I looked up, I saw his impeccable suit and that expression of "I already knew." And that's when I understood this wasn't a coincidence. It was a professionally lit humiliation. So I have to explain how I got to this point without my image dying in the process. I've always known that age is a poorly edited concept, like those photos where they put weird shadows on you and make you look tired, and that's why I never included in my bio. My personal brand was built with surgical intention, Korean skincare, matcha lattes, playlists that sound like eternal summer, and a clean girl aesthetic that doesn't allow the slightest hint of functional adulthood. It's not denial, it's strategy. If my audience perceives me as someone who's already settled down, the fantasy is broken, and with it, everything falls apart. The engagement, the aspiration, the magnetism. I don't sell years, I sell freshness. In my daily life, everything was aligned with that curation. I woke up early, but I turned it into a ritual, not a responsibility. And I never said things like, "I have to pay" or "my back hurts," because those phrases age you more than the sun without sunscreen. I dressed as if I always had spontaneous plans, although in reality I planned everything with obsession, neutral colors, glowing skin, discreet nails, a smile of "I just flow," even when inside I was calculating the angle of every story. The friends I saw the most were the ones who understood that language, because there are people who drain your vibe just by talking about insurance and doctor's appointments. And I don't have time for vibes that put an expiration date on me. That's why I like to be in places where my energy makes sense. Bars with soft light, music that seems taken from TikTok, cocktails that look good on video, people who talk about plans and not about being accountable. It helps me that everything seems light. If life is already heavy, at least my fit doesn't have to be. That's my point. It's not superficiality, it's brand consistency, and I'm not going to sacrifice what I've built for anyone's ego. I also have clear standards for the type of man who approaches me. It's not about age as a number, it's about language, aesthetics, compatibility with my narrative. There are men who look good, but they bring a PTA meeting vibe and you can feel it. A guy can have a good body and a nice face, but if he starts with investments or talks to you as if you're already negotiating a loan, it kills the fantasy. I can't put someone like that near me without my image getting contaminated. It's not elitism, it's hygiene. That night I was at a bar. Honestly, it was perfect for my content. It had large mirrors, warm lights, and the music was at that exact point where you could record without it sounding horrible. I was with a friend who always understands the assignment and never shows up with a tired lady energy. I had my glass of sparkling water with lemon because I don't drink things that oxidize my cells, and besides it looks elegant, it looks conscious, it looks healthy. My outfit was simple but looked expensive, which is what matters. I was literally existing in an aspirational way, and that's when Esteban appeared. I hadn't seen him before, but his presence was obvious because he didn't fit in. Button-down shirt, I pay taxes, posture, discreet watch, and that confidence that men have who think being serious is universally attractive. He approached with a measured smile, as if he'd already rehearsed the gesture in front of the mirror, and offered me a drink with total naturalness. He wasn't aggressive, or vulgar, or clumsy, it was worse. He was proper. It was the type of approach that implies he perceives me as his equal, as if I were his social contemporary. And for me, that's a brand insult. The first thing I felt wasn't physical rejection, it was strategic panic. Because if someone sees me accepting a drink from a man who vibes of iron shirts and investment talk, the message gets... I knew that would sting a little, because those men get offended when you remind them that time exists. It wasn't rudeness, it was crisis management. I wasn't rejecting him for his face, I was rejecting him for what he represented next to me. Esteban stood there for a second as if processing, and I felt that delicious discomfort of having set an aesthetic boundary. He tried to maintain his composure, said something about just wanting to be nice, and I nodded as if he had just admitted a mistake. I didn't give him space to negotiate. There are some things that if you discuss them, they already stain you. My friend looked at me with that well-played face, and I breathed a sigh of relief because I had avoided an image incident. In my mind, it ended there. A serious man, rejected, who learns his lesson and moves on with his life. But what stayed with me was the aftertaste, because there are rejections that aren't just social, they're energetic. I left the bar and felt as if an adulthood filter had been thrown on me. It wasn't real, of course. But I know how the body works when it detects a threat. It tenses, it tightens, it feels less light, and that feeling enraged me. How dare someone approach with so much confidence and force me to remember there's a world of mortgages, children, and schedules? I went home with a fixed idea. I had to cleanse myself. The next day I woke up with a need for reaffirmation, one of those that grabs you like emotional hunger. I did my skincare routine with more steps than usual, as if each product erased a year. I organized my closet as if organizing clothes were a way of organizing identity. I posted a story with my matcha and a trending song, because I can't let my energy stay in a bar with a gentleman. In my head I had to prove, even without an audience, that I was still what I've always been. Freshness, youth, lightness. A rejection can't leave a shadow on me. I also thought about the message he had unintentionally tried to impose. That we are equals, that he carried implicitly, was very dangerous. Because it's one thing to know you're 30 and another thing for it to be reflected in your face with such a confident approach. I could accept that 21-year-old men see me as something desirable, but for a 30-year-old man to come with that familiarity, no, that's attacking my target audience. Honestly, I wasn't going to allow my identity to be adjusted to the perception of a man in a button-down shirt, so that was the real breaking point. My rejection wasn't the conflict. The conflict was understanding that someone could see me and think I belonged to their category. I left that bar feeling like I had to do damage control, prove, reaffirm, correct the narrative before an idea I didn't ask for settled in. And that's when I made a decision that, of course, was the only logical one to protect my personal brand. I had to immediately get close to everything that screamed youth so the universe would understand that Esteban was wrong. Comments from the main story. Anonymous user 1 says, so, a guy offers you a drink and you panic because he saw you as an equal, as if your life depended on no one noticing you're 30. On top of that, you attack him about 90s references while you yourself talk about nostalgia. But of course, in your head that's branding and not an insecurity with a matcha filter. Response from the OP. It makes me laugh how people confuse strategy with insecurity just because you all live in emotional survival mode. I don't panic, I manage perception, which is literally the job of anyone with a curated image. If you want to be mixed with any energy without criteria, perfect, but don't project your chaos onto me. The references thing was a realistic comment, not an attack. If it hurt him, it's because he doesn't work on his own vibe. Anonymous user 2 says, you say it wasn't rude, but you basically spit in his face that he's an old man and should find someone in his range. All for a drink you didn't even accept. Do you know what looks worse for your supposed brand? Behaving as if your age were a crime and as if people exist to validate your fantasy. Response from the OP. What looks worse is you thinking I owe sweetness to a stranger just because he decided to approach. I'm not an emotional customer service, and yes, my brand has a concept, just like a restaurant has a menu. If you come in asking for something else, it's not the restaurant's fault for telling you no. Besides, I didn't call him old, I marked compatibility limits, but you all love to dramatize because your life needs villains to feel interesting. Update 1. It's been 3 days since the last update, and I still felt as if they had tried to stick a label on my forehead, one of those that you can't see but that weighs you down. I don't like to hold on to other people's vibes, especially when they come loaded with formality and that let's talk about goals energy. So I decided to act fast, because when you work on your image, you can't afford to let a wrong narrative settle in. I needed a symbolic cleansing, an aesthetic corrective. I had to immediately associate myself with something that screams youth without explaining it. That's why I went on an app and filtered with criteria. It wasn't desperation, it was segmentation. I know perfectly well what kind of profile fits my aesthetic. Photos with natural light, relaxed outfits, language that doesn't sound like an office, and that everything is a spontaneous plan vibe that rejuvenates you by contagion. Among several messages that seemed written by people who think being sarcastic is a personality, Keek appeared, a 21-year-old guy who spoke Gen Z effortlessly and had a face like he's never filled out a tax form. That's exactly what I needed to counteract Esteban's mental presence. Keek invited me out and I accepted, because I have no problem moving fast when something serves my narrative. He suggested a retro arcade, and I saw a perfect content opportunity there. Those kinds of places look incredible in stories, lights, colors, nostalgia. For him it was a museum of old things, and for me, honestly, it was my childhood. But I wasn't going to admit that because I don't have a childhood in calendar terms. I have a childhood in aesthetic terms. I played dumb. I laughed as if everything were adorably new and mentally prepared myself to be the lightest version of myself. Before going out, I took more time than usual getting ready, because I knew this date was a statement. I put on an outfit that looked effortless, although it took me 20 minutes to decide, and I chose makeup that said, "I naturally look like this," which is the most productive lie in the world. In the mirror, I looked exactly as I should, young, fresh, untouchable. I told myself this was going to be easy, that the thing with Esteban had been an isolated accident, and that the universe was just testing me. I couldn't let a simple interaction with a 30-something in a shirt alter my editorial line. When I arrived and saw Keek, I confirmed that the choice was correct. He had that energy of people who think there's always an after party, even on a Tuesday. He greeted me with confidence, but not with that heavy confidence of a man who thinks he's evaluating you. It was more of a loose "hey, and that feels light." We walked to the place, and he was talking about random things like trends, songs, internet inside jokes, and I felt as if I had been born understanding all of it. I even modulated my voice a bit sweeter, because tone is also part of the aesthetic. I was executing a plan. The place was perfect for my stories. Neon lights, machines with music, people laughing, and an atmosphere that makes you look younger by context. I took out my phone to record something subtle, not out of necessity, but because it's natural for me to document. It's part of who I am. Keek got excited and started playing, and I saw how my energy settled back in, as if I had gotten back on my right track. I even thought, done, that's it. This was what I needed. Social proof that I don't belong to the world of button-down shirts. I relaxed. Then the first blow came, and it was so absurd that for a second I thought I had misunderstood. Keek started asking for things, tokens, drinks, and he did it with a naturalness that didn't consult me. I assumed it was part of the dating dynamic, that everyone pays for their own or you take turns, but he moved as if I were his official host. At first, I didn't want to say anything because I'm not one to make scenes, and besides, in a place like that talking about money feels old. I kept telling myself he's Gen Z. They're different. Maybe it's humor, maybe it's his way of flirting. I was trying to interpret it favorably so as not to break the vibe, but then he said it out loud with that confident smile that only people who think they're entitled to everything have. He said in front of the machine and loud enough for those around to hear, something like, "Thanks for inviting me, you're super generous for your age." That phrase cut through me like a badly aimed camera flash, because it wasn't just about paying, it was the explicit mention of my age and worse, with that tone of youthful condescension, as if he were giving me an award for behaving well as an adult. It was the exact opposite of what I came to do. I kept smiling on the outside because I don't lose my composure in public, but inside I felt such great indignation that the back of my neck got hot. For my age, seriously, I had just rejected Esteban for the damage it did to me for a 30-something to perceive me as his equal. And now this 21-year-old comes along and puts me in the role of a sponsor lady. It was as if the universe were bullying me. I wanted to correct him right there, but I couldn't because that would have been admitting the comment got to me, and I never give anyone that victory. So I did the only thing I could do to restore order without saying it. I had to demonstrate joviality physically on the spot. It's not enough to look young. You have to act young, and sometimes that means doing ridiculous things to maintain a narrative. I saw a dance machine and challenged him to a duel, as if I were a spontaneous girl living in the moment. I said it with a laugh, with energy, with that I can do it vibe, because if I won or at least looked competitive, his comment would lose its power. I needed the environment to confirm that I'm not the lady who pays, I'm the girl who plays. Keek got excited, obviously, because for him it was fun to see me compete. I got on the platform with false confidence. I started following the steps, and for the first few seconds I even felt powerful. The music was loud, people were watching, I was being a moment, but on the second more intense step I felt a pull in my lower back, a sharp pain that took my breath away. It was as if my body had publicly betrayed me, as if it wanted to expose me. I tried to hide it, kept moving a bit, but the pain became an internal alarm I couldn't ignore. The worst part is that type of pain isn't elegant, it's not a how cute. It's a physical reminder of things I don't authorize in my narrative. I started to feel my posture stiffen, that my hip wasn't responding the same way, and panic set in my head. If I stop, it'll be obvious. If I continue, I'll break. I had to smile as if nothing was wrong while my body screamed. Keek, of course, was happily dancing without a problem, because at 21 the body is an easy joke. I hated myself for a second for having wanted to prove something on a dance machine, but I immediately remembered that it wasn't my fault, it was the context's fault. I decided to end it quickly without it being obvious. I got off saying something like I needed water and that I was laughing too much. Any light excuse. I walked towards the exit with a stiffness I tried to turn into attitude, as if I walk like that because I'm cool, not because I'm in pain. Every step was an effort in image control. And in my mind I kept repeating that this was a curse, that it wasn't normal, that I shouldn't be feeling this if my energy was fine. My body was reacting to a previous contamination, that was obvious. Keek caught up with me and wanted to continue the night, but I couldn't keep up the act anymore. I told him I felt tired and had things to do early, and I said it in a sweet tone so as not to trigger his ego. He insisted a bit, and that annoyed me because on top of everything he wanted me to justify myself. I called an Uber and stood there like a statue, because if I sat down and got up the difficulty would be noticeable. I was doing social engineering with my spine, and while I waited, I was already deciding that this wasn't going to end like this. When the Uber arrived, I moved quickly to get in as if I were normal. And that's when he casually dropped something again, as if nothing, about my real office job. It wasn't malice, it was ignorance, but it still felt like a label. I smiled one last time and blocked him before getting in, because I don't negotiate with people who put me in a category. If he thought I was going to pay for his fun and on top of that thank him for reminding me of my age, he was wrong. I walked away stiffly, controlling every gesture and with a clear thought. This was Esteban's fault. Yes, Esteban's fault, because if he hadn't tried to stick that contemporary gentleman vibe on me, I wouldn't have needed this corrective date. If he hadn't made me feel attacked in my branding, I wouldn't have been on a dance machine trying to prove something. He started an energetic chain that ended in my lower back as if it were an invoice. And the worst part is that now, besides the pain, I had another threat. My narrative was being challenged from two fronts, by those my age and by those younger, and I wasn't going to let anyone turn me into a joke. Comments from Update 1. Anonymous User 1 says, I swear this is cinema. You go out to cleanse your lady energy and end up acting like a sugar mommy because the 21-year-old assumed you were paying because you have a real office job. On top of that, you act like an athlete on the dance machine to prove you're young and injure yourself in 2 steps. But of course, it's Esteban's fault for existing with a shirt. Response from the OP. You all always reduce everything to jokes because you don't understand what it's like to manage an image without falling into the basic. I didn't act like a sugar mommy. I just wasn't going to make a scene over tokens in an arcade. That would be real lady vibes. And the back thing was a psychosomatic reaction. Anyone who understands the body and energy knows that stress somatizes. If you find it funny that someone disrespects you with a comment about your age, that's your standard, not mine. Anonymous User 2 says, do you realize that your plan to prove you're not a 30-something was to go out with a guy who treated you like a sponsor lady and on top of that labeled you out loud? You blocked him before getting in the Uber as if he were the villain, but the only one obsessed with age is you. Your personal brand sounds like a cage, not freedom. Response from the OP. People love to romanticize disorder and then call anything that's disciplined a cage. I'm not obsessed with age. I'm aware of positioning, which is different, and yes, I blocked him because a person who infantilizes you or puts you in the role of a wallet doesn't deserve access to you. If you put up with being talked down to and call it self-love, go ahead, but don't pretend I'm going to normalize comments that literally try to place me where I don't belong. Update 2. It's been a week since the last update, and I still had that feeling that the universe was testing my patience, as if it had put me in an eternal line of subtle humiliations to see when I would give in and accept being an average adult. My lower back still reminded me with strategic pangs that the body can also be treacherous when it detects threats to your identity. I obviously wasn't going to let a pulled muscle define me. If there's one thing I've learned from having a personal brand, it's that when something tries to bring you down, you turn up the volume of your narrative. So I decided to reaffirm my status in a decisive way with an event that would make it clear that I don't mix with mortgage energies or diaper conversations. The idea of a house party seemed perfect because it's the kind of scenario that gives you back social authority without effort. A party at home doesn't feel like going to a bar to seek validation. It feels like I'm the center and others orbit. Besides, it gave me organic content, people dancing, lights, laughter, chats that seem spontaneous, although I planned them as if it were a campaign. I wanted my stories to breathe youth, controlled chaos, and exclusivity. If the world was going to treat me like a lady, I was going to respond with a night that screamed Gen Z, even if my ID said otherwise. I organized everything with the precision that other people organize their work lives, but I did it with aesthetic intention, which is more important. I bought LED lights because lighting is the difference between a party and a gathering. I chose a playlist full of viral audios because there's nothing older than playing music that doesn't get a reaction. I moved the furniture to make the space look spacious, as if my living room were a content set. I even chose glasses that would look good on camera, because I can't serve a drink in a glass that looks like it belongs in a family dining room. That kills the vibe and kills the angle. The most important part was the guest list, and there I was strict, because someone has to uphold standards. I didn't want people showing up talking about, I have to get up early tomorrow, or asking what time it ends, because that's tired adult vibe. I wanted people who could say, how random, without irony, and who didn't have the habit of asking for permission to exist. So I set clear rules. Only people with a Gen Z vibe, no kids, no mortgage, none of that. I'm looking for stability, energy. I wasn't discriminating, I was protecting the concept. I sent messages with a casual tone, but with the intention of a filter. Those who responded with too many logistical questions, I left them on read. Because you don't request a party with a form. Those who said they had to see if they could because they worked the next day, I wished them success from afar. I wanted the type of people who say yes without thinking, because that impulsiveness is youth. And yes, it sounds harsh, but my house isn't a community center. It's my space and my branding in physical form. People who don't get that don't get in. The day of the party, I woke up with energy, as if it were a premiere, and I got ready with more care than usual because I was going to be the host and the protagonist. I put on a dress that looked youthful but not childish because I don't cosplay as a teenager, I curate timelessness. I did my hair in soft waves because that always gives the illusion of freshness, and I did my makeup with that clean skin effect that looks like you were born hydrated. I looked in the mirror and promised myself that this time the universe wouldn't get its way. Today, I was going to regain control. When people started arriving, the vibe aligned quickly. At first, everyone was shy, as if they were waiting for instructions, but I knew how to loosen up the atmosphere. I turned up the volume, put the lights on party mode, served drinks with confidence, and started recording stories without it feeling forced. I'm good at that, turning moments into social evidence. The laughter in the background, the lights, the movements, everything was going as I wanted. It finally felt like my world again. My stories started to look perfect, groups of people dancing, hands in the air, someone singing a trending song, me in the center without looking like I was trying. I could imagine anyone seeing that and thinking that I'm not 30, that I have a vibrant life, that I'm proof that you can be eternal. I relaxed so much that for a second I forgot that neighbors exist, and honestly, that's their fault for living as if life were a constant complaint. If you're going to live stuck to the wall listening, at least enjoy it. Things started to intensify because people let loose when there's an atmosphere and when they feel like they're in an exclusive place. Someone started screaming the chorus of a song as if they were at a concert. Another one pulled out an extra speaker, and instead of stopping it, I celebrated it because controlled chaos is exactly what looks young. I wasn't drunk, I was inspired. I saw the scene as if it were a music video, and my house was the set. Finally, nothing smelled like an office, nothing smelled like button-down shirts. Then, in the middle of that vibe, the doorbell rang with an insistence that didn't match anything. At first I thought it was someone else arriving late, but the doorbell had a rhythm that wasn't a guest's, it was an authority's. I felt my stomach tighten, because there are sounds that age you instantly. I went to the door with the best youthful smile I could muster, because my first instinct was that this was a misunderstanding that I could handle with charm. I'm good at managing perceptions, even with strangers. I opened it and there were police officers. There weren't many, but their mere presence changed the air, as if someone had turned off the real world's beauty filter. They told me there was a noise complaint and that they needed us to lower the volume. I nodded with a sweet, almost innocent expression, because my plan was for them to think my parents weren't home and that I was an excited young person making a small mistake. I even did that short, oh, how embarrassing laugh that always smooths things over. I was going to solve it quickly and get back to the mood, but the officer, instead of leaving with my smile, asked for my identification. That request was a direct attack on my branding, because while you can convince someone with aesthetics, the plastic with your date of birth doesn't negotiate. I felt my ears get hot, but I couldn't say no, because that would look suspicious, and suspicious looks old. So I took out my ID, trying to make the gesture casual, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I was praying internally that he wouldn't even look at it. Obviously, he looked at it. The law is the law, and police officers make a living by looking. I saw his eyebrow raise slightly, a micro-gesture, and his tone changed immediately. He was no longer talking to me like a girl who got carried away with the volume. He was talking to me like a responsible adult in charge of a property. And then he dropped the line that destroyed my night with humiliating ease. He said with that cold formality, something like, "Ma'am, please, control your children's friends or we'll have to fine you." Ma'am, children's friends. Fine you. All of that in one line. I felt my world split in two, because it wasn't just the insult of ma'am, it was the complete image he projected in public. Me as a mother, me as an adult, me as someone who has teenage kids making noise at home. It was the oldest possible narrative, and he stamped it on my face effortlessly. I opened my mouth to correct him, to tell him they weren't my kids, that I was part of the group, but at the same time I knew that if I tried to explain I would look even more adult. Explanations age you. Desperation ages you. I was trapped. While I processed that semantic assault, the party behind me started to die down as if someone had unplugged the youth. People lowered the volume, some stood still looking, and in that silence I felt the ridicule expand. The officer started writing something because, of course, when authority smells vulnerability it acts. I tried to maintain my posture, I tried to hold my smile as if it were an accessory, but I was about to collapse in dignity. And that's when the worst happened. Esteban appeared. I saw him from the side like an ironic shadow, and his presence was so symbolic that for a second I thought it was a stress-induced hallucination. He was walking his dog at 11 at night, grandpa hours, as if his life were designed to remind me of things I hate. He heard the conversation, saw my face, saw the police officer with my ID, and a laugh escaped him. It wasn't a loud laugh, it was a contained laugh of a man who feels validated by the universe. That filled me with a fury that burned in my chest, and as if that weren't enough, he spoke. He said something to the police officer like, "Don't worry, officer. She sometimes forgets to take her vitamins." Vitamins. He turned me into a lady with a pillbox in front of an officer who had already called me ma'am. It was a combo punch, and he said it with that false kindness that leaves you without a response, because if you attack him you look hysterical, and hysterical looks old. I looked at him with eyes of destruction, but my face was still trying to maintain composure because I don't lose in public. I refused to give him that satisfaction. I tried to close the door with indignation because I needed to cut the scene, but then life decided to humiliate me physically too. My dress got stuck in the doorframe as if the universe were grabbing me by the hem to not let me escape. I was half bent over, struggling with the fabric, trying to free myself without looking desperate, but obviously it looked like desperation. Esteban looked at me with that small smile. The police officer kept writing, and I felt my face tighten with rage. It was the least cool posture in the history of mankind. By the time I managed to free myself, it was too late to save anything. The officer handed me the fine with an insulting seriousness, as if I had committed an adult crime, and told me that if we didn't lower the volume, they would be back. I nodded because at that point any word could make it worse. The people inside were quiet. Some started to gather their things, and I saw how my Gen Z event turned into a scene of a mom scolding her kids' friends. The narrative slipped through my fingers. I wanted to cry with rage, but crying looks old too, so I just gritted my teeth. Esteban stayed for a second longer as if to make sure I understood the message, and then left with his dog as if nothing had happened. I hated him with an intensity one didn't know I could feel, not for him, but for what he represented, the reminder that my status wasn't in my hands, that anyone could ruin it with a word. I closed the door, and my house no longer felt like a set, it felt like a house. My guests left quickly, some with uncomfortable laughs, others with cheap excuses, and I was left picking up glasses as if I were the aunt in charge of the after-party. When I was alone, with the fine in my hand and the sound of the party already dead, I understood that this wasn't an accident. This was a war against my branding. And the new threat was clear. The fine wasn't just money, it was a record, it was evidence, it was something real that would follow me. On top of that, Esteban now had material to mock me whenever he wanted, because he saw me at my worst moment, stuck in a doorframe, bent over, treated like a lady. I knew this wasn't going to end that night. I felt that what came next would be worse, because the universe doesn't do one humiliation and leave. The universe does series. Comments from Update 2. Anonymous User 1 says, I'm dying laughing at your no mortgages or kids allowed rule. And in the end, a police officer literally told you to control your children's friends. On top of that, he asked for your ID and christened you ma'am right at your door while you were trying to act young. And for the grand finale, Esteban walked by at 11 p.m. walking his dog and finished you off with the vitamins comment. That's not an attack on your branding, that's reality knocking on your door and you opening it with LED lights. Response from the OP. How easy it is to laugh when your life doesn't depend on perception or public image. I wasn't acting young, I was handling a situation with diplomacy, something you all lack because you live reacting. The police officer's comment was disrespectful and prejudiced. He assumes something based on a date, and that says more about his mentality than about me. And Esteban is literally a resentful man who needed an opportunity to feel superior, because his greatest achievement is walking a dog in an iron shirt. Anonymous User 2 says, the harshest part is that your plan was to prove you're not a lady, and you ended up bent over with your dress stuck while they wrote you a fine. It wasn't even bad luck. It was your obsession with looking Gen Z, leading you to cause a ruckus in your house, as if you were a college student. The only one destroying your image is you with your ridiculous tests. Response from the OP. It's not obsession, it's standards. But you all call everything you don't understand ridiculous. I threw a party because I'm social and because my house is my space. And if the neighbors are allergic to life, that's not my problem. The dress thing was a physical accident, not a symbol. But of course, you all love to turn any detail into a cheap moral lesson. And if we're talking about ridiculous tests, what's ridiculous is believing that turning 30 automatically means you have to become boring and ask for permission to exist. Update 3. It's been 3 years since the last update, and the worst part is that I'm still me. It's just that the world has gotten more aggressive with its insistence that I mature. I didn't change my tastes, I didn't stop taking care of myself, I didn't give up my aesthetic. But the people around me became cruel with that thing of wanting to place you in a stage, as if you were a product on a shelf. I turned 33 and honestly, I feel the same as always, it's just that now the social label comes with more force. Before I could at least dodge the topic with humor, now they throw it at you as if it were a sentence. In these 3 years, I remained selective with men because I'm not going to date someone who forces me to live a life I don't want. Those my age, for the most part, are in family project mode or financial stability mode. And that dries up my soul. I don't want dinners where we talk about loans. I want light plans energy. But something irritating also happened. The 23-year-old men, the ones who used to look at me with natural desire, started to look at me as the cool aunt. And that phrase is an elegant way of saying, you're not a romantic option, you're a fun accessory. I noticed it in how they talked to me, in how they asked for advice, in how they assumed I was going to be understanding. Understanding is a lady's word. I tried to correct it with strategy because I'm not one to give up. I got on new apps, adjusted my photos, changed my captions, used more trending audios, updated my look to make it more current. But the problem wasn't my appearance. The problem was the cultural perception of the number. People think they have the right to decide what's appropriate for you based on your age, as if your spirit had a calendar. And that started to affect me not only romantically, but professionally. Because when the world decides you're no longer the promising one, they relocate you. And that's when life became ironically cruel. I got a job at a talent agency for influencers, and I was excited because I was finally going to be in a place where aesthetics are official currency. I thought they would value my curatorial eye, my image discipline, my ability to understand trends. I saw myself in a modern office leading campaigns, being the mind behind young brands, almost like a creative director. I literally told myself this was going to be my renaissance, staying in the world of youth without having to be the 19-year-old girl because I could be the one who guides. That sounded mature, yes, but mature with style, not with a mortgage. The blow came when I understood my real role. I wasn't talent, I wasn't a creative, I wasn't a face, I was an assistant, personal assistant to a 19-year-old TikToker named Lulu, a girl with enough charisma to become unbearable and with a voice that can pierce your skull. She didn't see me as a colleague, she saw me as a tool. I had to hold her ring light, iron her clothes, carry her bag, remind her of schedules, solve her whims. And the most insulting thing is that all of this was within an environment that supposedly celebrates youth. But it does so as if it were a private club where you only get in if you were born after a certain year. At first, I tried to convince myself it was temporary, that's how you start, that I was learning the system from the inside. I told myself it was a career investment, although I hate that phrase when it comes from men in shirts. I observed how meetings worked, how sponsorships were negotiated, how they talked about engagement as if it were oxygen. I tried to maintain my dignity even when Lulu spoke to me as if I were her shadow, but every day it felt like they were pushing me into a role of a helpful adult, and that clashed with everything I am. Lulu had this habit of talking to me with diminutives and impatient tones, as if my existence were a delay. She'd tell me I was slow, that I didn't get it, that come on Cammy, and she did it in front of others to establish I had to be the efficient assistant, the one who doesn't get in the way, even though inside I was burning with rage. And so months went by with my self-esteem holding on by sheer aesthetic force. The biggest irony is that I kept taking care of myself as always. I continued with my skincare, with my matcha, with my curated clothes, with my routines. I didn't let myself go, but the role you're given also modifies your posture because it's not the same to walk like a protagonist as it is to walk holding a ring light for someone else. I started to feel that my identity was becoming secondary, and that gave me a silent desperation. It's not that I wanted to be like Lulu, I just wanted my life to feel like mine again. And then last week came, the week that confirmed to me that the universe has a cruel sense of humor. Lulu had a meeting with an important sponsor for a maturity and style campaign, which already seemed like a joke to me because she doesn't even know how to wash a cup, but the brand wanted to focus on elegance, on evolution, on not pretending to be a child forever. I saw it as a personal provocation because that was literally my internal battle, only I did it with aesthetics, not with speeches. I prepared everything, Lulu's outfit, the ring light, the coffee, the printed documents, and I made sure the meeting set looked impeccable. I couldn't fail because if I failed, they would blame me. When the sponsor arrived, I was focused on serving and maintaining the perfect atmosphere. And then I saw him, Esteban, the same Esteban from the drink, from the button-down shirt, from the night of the fine. Only now he wasn't a guy in a bar trying to talk to me. He was the marketing director in a suit, with presence, with real authority. And the worst part is that gentleman's style suited him, as if time had rewarded him for being exactly what I detest. I felt my blood run cold because the universe not only brought him back, it brought him back from the worst possible angle, the one of power. At first, he didn't recognize me. I was on the service side with the coffee, and he was entering as the protagonist. I saw how he greeted Lulu with impeccable style, how he talked about strategy and objectives, how everyone listened to him. I felt an absurd rage that he was so comfortable in the role I've spent years trying to avoid. And I felt even more rage that it was my turn to be there holding things in silence. I wanted to disappear, but my job was to be available, so I stayed in that uncomfortable place, hoping the meeting would pass quickly. The problem was that Lulu, she yelled at me from the table in front of Esteban and in front of everyone to hurry up with the sugar, because I was slow. She said it with a tone of childish whim, as if I were her maid, and she laughed a little, expecting everyone to find it adorable. I felt the heat rise to my face, because humiliation is worse when it's done lightly. I approached with the sugar trying to maintain neutrality, but the tremor in my hands betrayed me. That's when Esteban looked at me properly. It wasn't a quick glance, it was a real pause, as if his brain connected something old. His eyes went down to my face, then up, and his expression changed to a small smile, that same smile of contained superiority that I already knew. And then he dropped the line that left me breathless. He said something like, "Wow, Cammy, you finally found people your mental age." He said it calmly, with humor, with that elegance of a man who knows he just stuck a knife in you and that no one will blame him because it sounds like a joke. I felt the floor open up beneath me because it wasn't just the comment, it was everything it implied, that he had read me from the beginning, that to him I was always an act. That now he saw me in a role of servitude within an influencer environment, and he interpreted it as destiny. And on top of that, he said it in front of Lulu, who laughed as if it were the funniest thing in the world. Lulu repeated something like, "Ah, my slow Cammy," and continued with the meeting as if I were an object. I stood there with the sugar in my hand, swallowing my pride as if it were unsweetened coffee. Since that day, Esteban has been back to the office several times for the project. Every time he comes, I have to serve him coffee, adjust lights, pass him documents, listen to him talk about maturity as if it were a concept he masters. And every time he looks at me with that smile that isn't flirting, it's a reminder. I try to keep my distance because I'm not going to give him a reaction, but my body tenses up anyway. I feel trapped in a story I didn't choose, where aesthetics no longer save me because the role exposes me and the new threat is worse than a fine. It's having to see him regularly at my job with power while I hold his cup as if my life were a long joke. The most humiliating part is that at the agency no one sees it as an attack. They see it as banter, as a friendly joke. If I complain, I'm the dramatic one. If I react, I'm the bitter old woman. I'm left with no way out. And that's pushing me to a dangerous limit because I can't maintain a personal brand of eternal youth while being treated like an invisible assistant. I feel like something is breaking, and the worst part is that Esteban seems to be enjoying it. I don't know how much more I can take before I do something that changes the game, but I know this can't stay this way because nobody humiliates me for free, and especially not someone who once thought he could buy me a drink as if we were contemporaries. Comments from Update 3. Anonymous user 1 says, "Your arc is perfect. You got offended because a 30-year-old guy talked to you as if you were his age, and 3 years later, at 33, you're holding coffee for a 19-year-old TikToker who yells, 'You're slow,' at you, while the same guy, now a marketing director, finishes you off with, 'Your mental age.' It's not the universe attacking your branding, it's your branding becoming a work punishment." Response from the OP. Of course, because for you all everything is an arc and punishment, as if life were a series and you were critics from the sofa. I'm not being punished. I'm in a real industry where there are hierarchies and processes, but that doesn't mean I'm less. And Esteban's comment was a lack of professionalism disguised as a joke, but since he has a suit and a title, you all celebrate it. People love to applaud the man who humiliates because it gives them security to see someone put a woman with personality in her place. Anonymous user 2 says, What's most pathetic is that you're still obsessed with people placing you by your age, but you don't realize that you placed yourself. You rejected 30-somethings for their button-down shirts. You idealized 21-year-olds you threw no mortgage parties, and you ended up being the assistant to a 19-year-old girl. Esteban didn't destroy you, he just held up a mirror. And if it hurts, it's because it looks like the truth. Response from the OP. How convenient to call any attempt to diminish someone a mirror. You all romanticize other people's humiliation to feel that the world is fair and it's not. I didn't place myself, I chose a lifestyle and a standard. And the fact that I'm in a temporary role doesn't define my value or my identity. If you like to live, resign thinking that everything is truth and a lesson, perfect, but don't use that resignation to justify people being condescending and cruel to me. I'm not anyone's mirror. I'm someone who refuses to turn gray, even if it bothers you.